the woodlouse.
We've given you many different names beyond woodlouse, such as bibblebug, chiselhog, monkey pea, chuggy pig, roly-poly, Johnny Grump. Which do you prefer?
Ooh, my favourite name for myself is actually none of those. My favourite name is God's Little Pig. I just think the name God's Little Pig, for what I am, it just encapsulates it, because I both do look like a pig, yet I look nothing like a pig, but there's something piggy about me. And the fact that I'm such a perfect pig that I'm God's little pig, I think is perfect.
Although you look like one, you're not actually an insect. You're an isopod and closely related to crabs and shrimps. Would you like to be living in the ocean?
Well, I do like things damp and I like things moist, so I'm a terrestrial crustacean, which is a fancy word for saying something that came from the sea originally and evolved, crawled out on land, but I still like it a little bit wet. So whilst I don't quite go back into salt water in the sea, I like to be under wet logs and damp stones and places where there's nooks and crannies full of damp stuff.
But you have gills instead of lungs. How do you breathe on land?
So all of these body parts are reminiscent from my ancestral past of that life lived in the sea, and I do still have some relatives who do still live in the sea and use those gills to breathe underwater. The way I breathe through them is by staying in those damp places, so I keep them wet and I can absorb oxygen as long as it's not getting too dry.
And how many legs do you have?
I have 14 legs, so 7 pairs. That's how you know I'm a woodlouse and not an insect.
Your body has this amazing armour-like structure across it. Is it heavy?
It looks heavy, but it's quite tough, and it does serve a purpose to defend me, so I can use it to hide away from nasty things that might want to try and eat me.
What does it protect you from? Who are your predators?
So one of my biggest enemies and predators is the woodlouse spider. And the woodlouse spider is a specialist of woodlouse eater. So if I'm crawling around under bark or rocks and I see one of those, I'm going to need to use my armour to defend myself.
And what do you like to eat?
I'm a detritivore, so I'll eat rotten bits of plants and animals and fungi, basically all the mucky stuff you find in the soil. To me, it's delicious.
And is it true that you eat your own feces?
Now that's something I can neither admit to nor deny, but it's something I could be tempted by. When I do pass my feces, there is in there copper, which is something quite useful to me. So if I want to keep that in my system, I might be tempted to recycle what I've put out before.
What would you say is your best feature?
I actually have a very special structure on my bum called a uropod, and this is effectively like a little straw. So when I find a pool of water, I can stick my bum into the water and suck it up for a drink. That's how I take water on board.
What's your greatest fear?
The thing I'm most scared about is drying out. As I said, I need things to be really damp and wet and moist, so if I go somewhere that's too hot or too dry, or if it hasn't rained for a while, I'm really scared about drying out, because if I do get too dry, I'll die.
Would you say you're a good parent?
Yes, I am, and that's not always what people think of when you think of invertebrates, but as a female woodlouse, I will look after my babies. I have a special thing on my tummy called a marsupium, and this is a little pouch that I hold my eggs in when they're fertilised. It's kind of like a wet fluid pouch. They're suspended in there, floating about, and those tiny little eggs will hatch into tiny miniature baby woodlouse, and I'll keep them there for quite an amount of time. I'll get a little bit thinner as they feed from me, and then eventually they'll hatch out, release into the woods as tiny baby woodlouse to live their own world.
Some of us call you roly-polies. Why is that?
I'm a certain type of woodlouse. I can roll up into a perfect spear and then roll away to get away from danger and also protect myself and my soft underbelly.
Would we miss you as a species if you were gone?
If you think about a woodland or a garden or any place outside, under all of those logs and rocks and damp places, there's millions and millions of me, all scoffing away, eating all of that rotten stuff. We're a really important part of the nutrient cycle because we break things down. So if there weren't any of me, we'd quickly start losing that cycle and all of the benefits that it brings.
What gets you excited?
A really good piece of rotten leaf that I can get tucked into and enjoy.
Where and when might we find you?
So you can find me all year round. I'm active in winter, spring, summer and autumn. If you turn over any log or any rock, all of those damp places I've mentioned, you're likely to spy me.
If you had a message for us, what would it be?
I think that just because something is perhaps on the face of it a little bit gross or a little bit weird looking or perhaps a little bit unpleasant to think about doesn't mean that it's not brilliant and fascinating and useful. So whilst I live in places that most other creatures might not like, where it's dark and dirty. I'm actually doing something really useful, and without me, you'd be in quite a lot of trouble. So I suppose don't judge a book by its cover.